Welcome to the Reimagine podcast. Each week, give yourself 30 minutes and meet the people working hard to create the future of insurance today.
Hi, this is Paul Tyler, and welcome to another special episode of the Reimagine podcast. Laura, good to see you.
It's great to be seen, Paul. I'm excited to be here today. And as you mentioned, it's a special episode. I feel as though we're doing more special episodes, which means we're up to really interesting things. So I'm excited to share that with our listeners.
Yeah, so this is week 2 of the story that we're telling of TalentBridge23. So do you want to introduce our guests and catch us up on what's going on?
Yeah, I'd be happy to. So since our last episode dropped, episode 1, where we talked about the foundation around the TalentBridge23 program, about the entities involved, we have UConn, we have UHeart, we have CGI, LTI Mindtree, Nassau Financial Group, just to name a few. We now get to dive in and talk to the individuals who are part of the program. It's interesting for us to see where connections are made, whether it's in our personal or professional careers, and where the interest comes from. This is an interesting opportunity, a unique set of educational pieces. So fitting them all together, we have with us here today, we have Yu Yin. She is representing the university perspective. She is a fellow within the program. We have John Thomson. For those of you who follow us on the regular for the Reimagine podcast, you will recognize his voice and his debonair face. He is joining us from the RiskX perspective, one of the participating companies, and Sergio Garcia. He is joining us as a corporate mentor from Nassau Financial Group. So we are happy, excited, and lucky to have you all with us today. Let's start out, for the sake of our listeners, if you could just kindly introduce yourself and talk to us a little bit about what drew you into this program.
Yeah, sure. Hi, my name is Yu Yan. I'm doing my PhD in environmental engineering at the University of Connecticut. I have a very much diversified background. So I was actually in the insurance industry like 5 years ago. So that's kind of drive me here to pursue my first semester degree in applied economics. And then I was trying to understand more about the reinsurance part. And catastrophe models are a huge part of it, including flooding, hurricanes. And we have actually a graduate student who had graduated a few years ago, and he's in the program. So that's why I got into the program. And what I'm doing is actually half on flooding and half more about renewable energy. So yeah.
Yeah, and just a quick question here, or two questions. One is, where are you from originally, and what really pulled you to Connecticut?
Oh, I am originally from China. So Connecticut, Hartford is the capital of insurance. So that's the reason why I choose Connecticut. Yeah.
Excellent. All right, we'll tell Susan Winkler and let her chalk that one down for a win, Laura.
Absolutely. And speaking of capital of insurance, John Thomson, if you could introduce yourself for those who may not have heard you yet, talk a little bit about your role today here with the RiskX seat.
Great. Well, good morning. It's great to be here. My role with RiskX is I've connected with RiskX, which is a company that was founded about 5 years ago in Germany, to begin to develop an alternative approach to financing risk for large organizations, typically corporates, if you will, to help them provide access to risk capital, which helps protect their balance sheets from systemic risks. Systemic risks are defined as risk events that are out there that are emerging and evolving. Examples would be risks associated with pandemic, cyber risk, climate risk, and supply chain risk, and so forth. These are risks that organizations, large corporates they've identified, but the traditional way of financing risk has been through insurance. And insurance companies struggle with these emerging risks because of the perceived lack of predictability and their balance sheets are not being able to support these risks in terms of their orientation or the magnitude that they have. So RiskX designed an approach which accesses new forms of risk capital and brings that and connects that to risk owners so that they can have alternative ways to supplement the typical insurance that they have in place. And that's the organization that I joined. I'm helping them. They're actually redomesticating to the U.S., to the United States. They have established a corporation in Delaware, and the Hartford will be their primary business site in the U.S. And I'm working with them to help operationalize their business in the U.S.
Excellent. John, your video is great. You may not have seen it yet, but everyone will have by the time this goes live. You've got a real interesting and kind of perfect background to bring to a company like this. Just talk a little bit about where you came from in your career here.
Absolutely. Well, I'm, as you can see clearly, I've been around for a long time. I have over 30 years experience in the areas of finance and risk. The majority of my largest experience was with the Cigna companies, where I worked in a number of those businesses that Cigna Corp owns and operates, but spent a lot of time there in the financial organization and learning different parts of the business there. I had a great experience personally where I spent 4 years where I picked up, and my family and we moved to Bermuda, and I ran 4 risk financing companies in Bermuda, which was a very exciting experience. And those companies focused on financing risk for oil and gas entities, which have difficulty because of the nature of the risk that they have with their business. And then I came back. I've worked in risk consulting, and I was the deputy insurance commissioner for the state of Connecticut. So I got a real varied background, but with a lot of different areas that need to come together to take a concept like alternative risk financing and alternative capital markets and operationalizing it. And that's why I work with RiskX, and that I find that very interesting because I tap into a lot of my past experiences, not just a singular area.
Yeah, and you mentioned finance and risk, and we have Sergio here with us today, and he knows a thing or two about that. Sergio, would you introduce yourself, please? Talk to us a little bit about your background and what brought you to Nassau and your interest in the program.
Yes, so far I have done, during my career, I have been working on different roles. Now I'm working at Nassau in the general accounting department. We basically record all of the transactions happening and put them into numbers. We do, in the department, we do like accruals, accounts payable, creating reports. And I specifically do the work with the intercompany settlements, like accounts payable to each company, and then do some accruals, daily balancing, and I do the corporate accounting transactions. And so my background overall is like I graduated my bachelor degree. It's in accounting. I am from Guatemala. I got that there, and then I came to Connecticut. Well, I came to do my MBA here, but it was mostly because of my wife. She was already studying here, so that's how I came. And that is, and ever since I decided then later that I was going to just be a focus on finance and accounting. And but before that, I did other roles such as sales. I tried to start a business. Well, I started, but then I kind of left that there. That was a good experience. So yeah, a little bit of everything.
Interesting. I usually do what my wife tells me to do. So, what pulled her to Connecticut?
Well, she is so her dad was in the Air Force, so she was moved all over the place. So she was never in one location. She was born in West Virginia, then she came to Connecticut to study. She was studying at nursing school in Yale. So when I met her in Guatemala, and then we started this long distance relationship. And she came here, and then I was in that moment of picking an MBA, I was thinking of going to Costa Rica, but then I was like, oh, well, I'm going to check and see for options. And then that's how we end up here.
Excellent. You're also a good paddler. We'll talk more about that one later.
Thanks.
So you have an interesting background, as you mentioned. You had been in the industry for a number of years, and you're going back for your PhD. You had mentioned to me it's a unique combination, and I see the connection between the environmental engineering and the data analytics. But how do you plan to bring that forward for individuals who may be listening, who are still in college or thinking about their career path, and maybe they're on their second or their third career? What made you want to combine those two, and where do you see the future of that study taking you?
I have to say at the beginning, I didn't really realize that's a career path. So when I was working I was actually working as a broker before, and then I went to an insurance company, but it's actually in reinsurance department. So from then, I started to get interested in all the models and works. And each year we actually get the model results from the consulting company, but they don't actually. There's a gap between the industry and the modeling company because as in insurance industry, people don't really understand how this model works, and they may not choose to believe it. But I want to see. At first, I just thought, oh, because our company actually pay a lot for these models, so can I understand a little bit better? So to help save the cost. So from then, I started to, maybe these models are very crucial for predicting the catastrophe losses. If I can learn a little bit about them, maybe I can contribute a little bit. Yeah, that's from where I began.
Yeah, it's interesting. In our last conversation, we spoke with Dustin Yoder, his CEO of Surify, and Dustin was sharing a little bit of his insights into what he finds to be a productive individual working inside of his company, whether an intern or a staff member. And a lot of what we talked about was intent, right? Understanding and identifying an opportunity and then taking those steps to go forward. So in your case, you saw the gap, you wanted to learn more to help fix that. And I think that stands out. And I think it's a lot of why people start businesses. Paul and I have had the opportunity to speak with hundreds of individuals on this show now. And what's common that plays throughout is people taking that first step and doing the thing that can bring them forward. So John, I want to flip this to you and say, you've gone down several paths in your career. Not only as, now on the startup side as the deputy commissioner within the insurance, you had a stint within education over at the University of Hartford. What would you give as a piece of advice for somebody who's early on in their career, around intent and identifying opportunities? And what do you do with that?
Well, it's interesting. You use the word intent, and I think that's a very good word to use when you talk about career direction and so forth. If you look at the space that you described in terms of the industry background and Sergio his background as well, the risk and finance and insurance industry, or particularly the insurance industry, for many years was able to sustain itself with talent that wasn't necessarily quantitatively driven. There was always a little core quantitative resources in insurance companies in the quote actuarial department, which was very familiar with advanced statistical models, and they could use those to do some element of predictability. But the predictability, interesting, was always looking in the rear view mirror. In other words, the past was always a good source of data to predict the future. Fast forward to 2023, we now live in a world where the past may give you some indications, a line of sight, if you will, but it's only one line of sight. And we now need to have much more analytics performed and to give more credibility and more input and more lines of sight into risk and financing decisions. And so the thing that I find interesting that I say to students that I've talked to, what I've taught in their classes, is that the need today is that students need to be have a very solid analytic foundation, because they need to be able to understand analytics, not just take the work of somebody else and say the statistical model said the answer is X. Well, that's one answer, but we know in the world today there's a set of outcomes, and we have to be prepared for a set of outcomes, not just one outcome. And that requires sort of this analytic orientation. And that's where I think that individuals like you and like Sergio bring this analytic, more quantitative orientation to the world of risk and risk financing. And we need those talents from those people to be able to do higher level analytics to improve the credibility of the prediction. But also have those individuals be able to explain and communicate, why the set of outcomes is what it is, and what are the implications, and how do you assign perhaps even probabilities to the different potential outcomes. And so it requires just a higher level of thinking from an analytics perspective. And that's what I really stress with my conversation with students, is you can't just look at sort of the softer side of Sears, as I call it, in terms of, maybe marketing or sales or whatever, in terms of making a business tick. You really have to understand the levers in the analytics that actually generate the outcomes or set of outcomes, and then help prepare for responses for those that are more have a higher level of predictive, but also be able to prepare for the unexpected. And that's where it takes a new thinker, a broader thinker today is essential in business, and particularly in the startup side of this. So,
okay, so I have a question, which is kind of basic, but you went through this matching program. Why'd you match? So what attracted you to RiskX, and John, why did you say, hey, you's a great fit for us? Start with you.
Yeah, I had an interview with the CEO, Dr. Marcus, and so actually, I've never met him before. So Mr. Thomson was actually at the pitch day. So I talked with Dr. Marcus a little bit about my background, and then he's saying, "Oh, I was actually want to do the similar thing," and he explained a little bit what he's trying to do right now. He's interested in hurricanes and trying to understand what kind of parameters is impacting the hurricanes. So then I check his background. Actually, he's expert in reinsurance. So that's kind of, I think, according to my background in reinsurance, that's going to be a good match.
John, how about you? What's stuck out with you, either the resume, the experience, or just the person?
Well, I think that was what I saw in the resume, like use resume. If I use her as an example of a of a rising young professional, is someone that understands the concepts of risk specifically, but also brings this quantitative ability to understand and understands how you advanced mathematic and statistical models come together to help generate information to make better informed risk decisions. And what I saw in Yu's resume and in her background is that she has that ability, in addition to the ability to function and explain how the models work and what are the implications of the outcomes that are generated with the models, and then being able to pull that through to help a risk professional make a enhanced risk decision based on the analytics that can be produced through mathematics and statistics. Does that make sense?
Absolutely. And Sergio, I'm gonna flip the question to you. So you're not paired with RiskX, but I think that's the beauty of this program. So when Michaela Hartle and I were sitting down and we were looking at who should be paired, a lot of it comes down to data. And a lot of it comes down to gut instinct. So we've had the opportunity as part of the program, just to surround with a little bit of color, we had the opportunity to meet with all of the fellows, the opportunity to meet with the mentors on the corporate side. And there's also a set of industry mentors as well. And then pair them together based on what we know and then what our intent for them is. So you and John with RiskX, it's to us, that was just an amazing match. And I think that it's a really good example of where alignment is and businesses going forward. But Sergio, I mean, it was fun for us to look at your background to say, where can Sergio have impact? Because every business has the finance, the analytic, the numbers based, and it's all very important. So for us, it was good fun. My question to you is, you're busy all day. I know that you have, you mentioned your family, you're active within the Nassau culture. You joined Paul and I out on the dragon boats and we're paddling ourselves down the Connecticut River. Why take time out of your full and rich schedule to be a mentor for this program?
Well, I think for me, it's always a good opportunity in terms of, I have been on both sides. Like I have been receiving like mentorship and also being a mentor. And I feel like it's kind of like before it always happens, like before being starting with anybody, like I feel like I have my toolbox and I'm like, okay, this is my toolbox. This is what I'm going to use. Then the moment that arrives and then we are actually starting with the mentorship, I'm like, oh, I think I need a new toolbox or I think to get information from somewhere else. So that's for me is like a good challenge and kind of feels like keeps me active. I'm more like always trying to do a little bit of research. And I was also studying here at the University of Yukon in the Excel building. So I felt like kind of good going back and kind of being in connection. And I was at some point part of some competitions there and it's always exciting and you get to know new people. And also like when having mentors, I always value how I had a really good mentor and I value how this person was pointing. We were in this case competition some time ago and he was kind of pointing us like, well, I don't know this, but you guys can actually, if you read these articles, you can reach out to these people that wrote those articles. At first we were like, a little bit hesitant, but we were very surprised about how people were able to reply to us and giving us like the story, but firsthand. And that was like a value, like a very unique experience. And I really like how, like, for me, it's about flexibility and just being open to new ideas. And I think that that's something that I like about this. And overall is like a challenge for everybody.
That's interesting. Could I build on what Sergio just said? Because I loved the fact you used the word toolbox. Because I think that's really important, and it is kind of interesting. You said you felt you had to go get a new toolbox in order to kind of participate. And what I would throw back and saying, that's the value I see you bring, Sergio, is your current toolbox, and because that's where I see this growing need in innovation and innovative companies or innovative projects and so forth is the need for, yes, we need new thinking and new, whether it be new statistical models or new, a kind of a new philosophy or a new business model. But what it comes down to is what's needed to take those organizations forward, those startups or whatever, is this ability to inject the operational discipline and rigor. And that's what's in your toolbox. And that's why you become, in my opinion, very valuable to any startup, is to bring that perspective that you have, they understand the preparation of financial transactions. Accounting really is a way of recording what actually goes on in the business. And then we keep score using debits and credits and able to understand how it goes. But that discipline and rigor and structure is so important to an innovative company that's in whatever mode they're in, whether they're pre-seed, or we have all kinds of buzzwords where people say they are, but it's really when you get to the starting line, you've got to have that rigor that people like you bring, Sergio.
Yeah, I agree. I think people are going to benefit from those skills you're bringing, Sergio, to the table. And John, maybe it's too early, but how far along in the process are you in terms of scoping out what you will be working on for the next few months?
Well, that's a very good question. I don't mean to dismiss RiskX or I would say RiskX is sort of what I would say is a bit at the starting line for a startup. And I'm not being critical, because we're at a point now where we need to bring those operational perspectives together with sort of the analytics and the blueprint of the models that have been done. And that's where professionals like you bring into, when she's bringing her background, is to be able to start to develop and build this the proof of concept out, and so that it becomes real and can be operationalized. And that's where I say RiskX is right now. Is we know it is the design works. All the feedback has been very positive. We've been able to look at and do some modeling and come up with some answers that have been proven to be valid. And there are organizations out there that are already seeking solutions from RiskX or have standing orders to say, when you're ready, we'd like to pursue this, because we don't have the risks properly financed for our to protect our balance sheet, and we can't find it, and we are anxious for this. So we know there's a market there, but we're at the starting line now where we have to be able to get out of the starting blocks and start to deliver, and that requires the analytic side of it, the operational side, and all fed by capital, which is sort of the lifeblood of any company, and that's what you have to pull together to make it work. And so my view is RiskX is sort of at that starting line and pulling all those pieces together, that within the next 60 days we'll be at a very different place, because we're finding capital sources are stepping up and saying, yes, we're interested. Organizations that are managing risk saying, yes, we have a need, we like the idea. And the RiskX model has been proved to be of interest, that it will all start to happen, but it all has to pull together. And so I don't want to say prematurely, oh, we're a startup, or I know there are startups out there to say, yeah, we've raised, seed capital of whatever, but yet they really haven't even gotten to the starting line yet. So I would say that's where RiskX is, Paul.
So do you see, this thing is up and running, it's a year from now, you got your capital. Does it feel more like a reinsurance company where you're doing contracts one by one, or does it look like a marketplace where, it's more like Lloyd's of London kind of, it's a trading platform?
Well, I think I would see it, Paul. It's a very good question, and where I see it is really more like it's a trading. It's a kind of this risk intermediary type of thing is what RiskX performs. RiskX itself won't be a primary risk taker. It will be a provider of analytics and support to determine sort of the appropriate measures and analytics that go with predictability, which will enable new capital market sources like hedge funds and investment banks and pension funds to be able to say, we'd like to take some of our capital and put it at risk in a different way, not just in a traditional equity or a bond type of vehicle, but look at some alternative ways of deploying capital that offer a return, diversify their investment risk. And that's matched up with the risk needs, which have sort of these physical risks, or pandemic risks, or climate change risk, or cyber risk, which offer a very attractive return. But they can make a decision based upon the analytics that we're able to develop, and that's where it's more of a platform for bringing a risk owner together with a risk taker, and they can make an informed decision versus having RiskX be a risk taker, because that requires billions of dollars to start to be in that. But those hedge funds and investment banks and pension funds have billions of dollars that they need to invest, and that's where RiskX brings that risk owner together with those pools of available capital.
So it's kind of like a Zillow for
a little bit
risk managers.
A little bit, yeah. And that's a very interesting comparison, because it is, because Zillow or Redfin, for example. Let's take the real estate market. They've come in and disrupted the traditional real estate market, which have been these used to be these local neighborhood or mom and pop real estate agents, which have been bought up by large conglomerates like Berkshire Hathaway or some sort. And now there's a new approach that recognizes they use and bring buyers together in a very efficient way, and add value along the road, and use analytics to do their thinking. Yeah.
Hopping on the fast forward train, if you were to fast forward about 5 months from now, and it's about time to give presentations to talk about your experience with the TalentBridge23 program, what do you anticipate, or what do you hope that some of these successes could look like? And that could be a success for you. It could be a success for the company. I leave that open to your discretion.
Okay, so what I'm really excited about working joining this fellowship program is I can really work with real people, insurance professions in the industry. So that's kind of like the big advantage I see through this program. I really love research that I have been doing for years before I got into the PhD program. But I really miss the environment, like working with people from different backgrounds. Research is kind of like very narrow. I work with my advisor and other professors, and they are all in the same field. So, but that's I love them, and they are really smart, and they give me a lot of suggestions. But I really miss the environment. I can go back to the insurance industry. Like, there are people like from different backgrounds, financing, the risk management, and also accounting, etc. So yeah, though I think that's the one I can benefit the most. What I can benefit for the company is that I can bring actually what I learned, the research skills in the university, and to see if I can apply them into the current market. And they can also give me feedback if I'm on a good track or not. Yeah, that's what I'm thinking.
Yeah, well, listen, we're right at the top of our time. This is great, Laura. How do we? Any final thoughts, questions for people on the show?
Sure. I think that I'll send a final question to Sergio because I'm curious. It's along those same lines. What is success going to look like for you? Say 5.5 months, 6 months from now, when the program wraps, what's the one thing that you're going to walk away with and be like, that was absolutely worth my time?
Well, I'm excited about to see the new projects. I really look forward to see the innovations because as I mentioned, I have experience in finance, but I don't really have the experience in terms of insurance products and ways of changing the industry, which sometimes it feels like it's just there are more opportunities, but you need to be creative, and so I'm looking forward to that and see what are the options there and what are the new ways of somehow be a game changer in the industry. And then from my perspective, I will feel accomplished if I am able to give part of my knowledge to anybody that needs that.
Excellent. All right. Well, listen, Sergio, thanks for offering your time. I know we're all really busy, especially this time of year. John, great to see you. If people haven't seen the video, check out our social media accounts. We'll probably put, assuming Laura, on our website someplace.
Absolutely.
It's a pleasure to meet, and I hope we, I hope you have just a great experience. I'm sure you will with John. Laura, this is great. I'll look forward to hearing what happens next week with some of our companies. And if you would like to stay with our journey, make sure to tune in next week to another episode of the Reimagine Podcast. Thanks.
Great.
Thank you.
Thanks for listening. If you enjoyed the show, please rate and recommend us on iTunes, Stitcher, Overcast, or wherever you get your podcasts. You can also get more great information about this company and other great startups at imagine.nfg.com.